local bookseller, and it's a quick return not that long after I did the first video in this kind of series, which is about the Ace science fiction specials. If you watch Richard in Canada, who has the Vintage SF channel, he's been covering the first series extensively in depth, the 1960s series. He's reading them all. What a good man he is. And a while ago I posted a video about the mid-70s series, the ones which were not edited by Terry Carr, and that was interesting because they're mostly obscure books, and I've got a pile of them here. And if you watch that video, you remember me saying that I hadn't really bothered to track down number 10 in the series of 11, which is Bob Shaw's Orbitsville. And at the end of the video, by the time I put it up and was editing it, I managed to get one. And this has just come for me from the USA, and it was really good. It was less than $5. The postage was more, of course. Quite pleased with that. So I'm just going to bag that up. So then I can do a thing at the end where I show you the lot, because, you know, I'm not a completist, as I always say. I have felt the urge a little bit with these. I didn't think I'd complete this so easily. I'm not a big fan of Orbitsville, even though I'm a huge Shaw fan. It's one of his most popular books. I've never been a big Dub Object guy. You've heard me say all this, but it is nice to have it. So that's kind of the 10th one. So at the end, I'll lay them out so you can see them for those of you who like completism. And you know, collecting is a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, why do we feel the urge to have everything? I guess it comes from the time when we're kids, when we are sort of shown really things which are numbered, and there's a set like T cards, it was when I was a child, or anything with a number on. And I've always been very leery of that, because I think it's just designed to sort of make money off you. So, and taste must come into it. But why have I got a Panther edition of New Romancer here today, and the original UK MacDonald hardcover First of the Wild Shore by Kim Stanley Robinson, the world first hardcover? Why are they there? Well, that's because today we're going to look at the third and final Ace special series, which were edited up to a point by Terry Carr, who also edited the first series, and they were dedicated to first novels. So we're going to go through them in the order they were released, and the first one to be released was actually this one. But as I say, this is the MacDonald hardcover edition. I will pick up a copy of the Ace one if I can find it at a reasonable price. It goes for silly money. They're uncommon in the UK because, of course, it wasn't available in the UK except in import shops. There goes Smudge the cat, who's fed up and being noisy. So I thought I'd show you that instead. And in my video a while ago, where I talked about the sort of top American male SF writers of the 1980s, I included this book and this author, and I'm quite critical of this. And I would say that I think Brian Aldiss put it better than me, he being more of a pro than me, sadly no longer with us. His summation of this in Billion Year Spree it was originally, I think is correct. So I didn't really want to get, you know, I'd spend a lot of money. There was one out there with one of my favourite dealers. It was £75, and that's just a silly amount of money for a paperback I don't like, you know. And if it was something really rare that I couldn't get in any other form, I'd save it maybe, but that's not going to happen. So that was actually the first one. I'll flash an actual picture of the Ace edition up. And the Ace one is nice, but I do love this MacDonald one. So, and that's the one I've read, and read it back in the day in a paperback of that. So that's why that's there. But we'll have a look through the series. So I've managed to get some of them recently, and this is one, I'll be quite honest, I knew nothing about. Palimpsest by Carter Schultz and Glenn Harcourt. I think I'd come across the name Carter Schultz before. But what really attracted me to getting it was the fact that Barry Milesberg says on the cover, a significant event. Now, Schultz wrote some short stories before this. There's one novel which is much, much later. I think it's about 2002, and it was a solo novel, but sort of quite limited career. Glenn Harcourt, I can't say I know anything about, but you see it's got this sort of matrix grid type design, which is very Tron and very New Romancer. So that's interesting. So this was the second one to come after the Robinson one. And as I say, this series was dedicated to first novels, and the most famous first novel in this series was William Gibson's New Romancer. The price, you see some very inflated prices for the Ace edition of New Romancer because it's the true world first. It was reprinted, so people are asking even silly amount for the reprint, and I've seen it being, people asking for up to $3,000, which is ridiculous. The real going rate, even for a first, is usually around £100 to £150. I haven't seen many go for more than that. I've seen a few go at that price, because the thing is, even though it's the true world first, what people really want is the first hardcover, the first printing of that, which is the Gollancz Yellow Jacket, which there were 500 of. I've got one. There was a reprint of that, and that has really rocketed up in price in recent years. So if you are going for these Ace books, don't pay silly money for an A format paperback, because even though it's the world first, it's not, you know, it's not the sort of thing you should be paying lots of money for. But anyway, this is Palimpsest, and this is in pretty good nick, and it looks amazing. And it's about archaeology and predicting the future, and the fact that Barry Milesberg is behind it. I'm really excited to read this, so that is something I'm looking forward to. But I think you'd agree, a nice cover, sort of echoes of Silverberg with the skull there as well. Very, very attractive. So there we go. So we'll see what else there is. Then the third one in the series was something I've shown you before, which is a favourite book of mine from the 1980s, and that's Green Eyes by Lucia Shepherd. And I've got the Chateau hardcover UK one. I read it in the Chateau paperback, which I don't have anymore. This is the world first. You can pick this up very reasonably, and Green Eyes was Shepherd's first novel, his first book. He was doing lots of short stories then. Very interesting guy, very psychedelic, very lush prose. The first four books and the first three novels and the short story collection, they're nearly all set in jungles and exotic locales, and he travelled around a lot. He was a bit of a lad. He was a bouncer at a cat house at one point, or so he claimed. T-shirt company, involved in all sorts of things, a real countercultural sort of guy, and he died very young, which was a shame. Great writer. And Green Eyes is, you guess you could call it a zombie novel. Now when I say a zombie novel, I don't mean ghouls, I don't mean flesh-eating beings, because of course we misuse the word zombie. A revenant, a returner from the dead that eats human flesh, is a ghoul, not a zombie. A zombie is strictly speaking to do with Haitian voodoo, and that is part of this. There's a CIA conspiracy. It's rather about sort of bringing the dead back to life and increasing their intelligence, and it's a really good book. And you know, there are moments where you think, gosh, this is going to turn into a gore fest, but it really is sort of a hot and sweaty and sort of jungly book, and I really, really love it. And I want to reread it because I've not read it for years, and it blew me away the first time around, and I'm going to reread that sometime this year and do a full review, because Lucia Shepherd is kind of neglected these days, and wrongly so, because he was really important and he made a big splash. Shepherd made less of a commercial impact, but he was a very, very fine writer indeed. Next in the series was Them Bones by Howard Waldrop, who was a Texan author, very witty, and I have the Legend hardcover of this. I've shown it in another video, and it's sort of a humorous sort of time travel archaeology novel. And yeah, he's got a witty guy, Waldrop, and I'm not a big fan of funny SF. I mean, I like it satirical. He's a bit more broad than, say, Robert Sheckley, and it doesn't always sort of do it for me. Flying Saucer Rock and Roll is probably his sort of big, most well-known story from that point, and this was his novel. And there's certain affinities with Michael Bishop in some ways, I would say. And you know, it's he's a friend of my friend Lee Kennedy, another great Texan SF writer who's kind of forgotten these days. She's really good, very small but elegant output. And as you see, this has got a Forbidden Planet sticker in 235. Most of these I picked up really cheap because I started to get into them, and I thought, well, I'll go as far as I can. I'm not going to go for the big expensive stuff, but it is what it is. So there you go, one to look out for. And you know, he's still out there. I think from that period, somebody who's similar and quite funny as well, but probably subtler, would be Terry Beeson, Bears Discover Fire. And I think I prefer Beeson to Waldrop, but it's been a long time, so I need to go back and look at that. Then of course we have the big one. As I say, I'll put in a little shot of what the Ace one looks like. This is a reprint of the Panther. I sold my signed first printing of this on eBay the other day. I got this one from Morris at Zardo's All You Need Is Books. Still very beautiful and lovely, but I'm not really going to pay out a lot of money for an Ace one because, you know, I've got the UK and world signed first hardcover, you know, and I've got the 10th anniversary edition signed, which is really uncommon. So I've got Neuromancer coming out my ears, really. So I think, you know, maybe one day, I know it'll frustrate some of you who like to see a complete collection, but, you know, it is what it is. Then we have Michael Swanwick in The Drift. I covered this book in my US sort of top 10 male writers in that period, and again, very, very good indeed, good writer. You'll notice this has a hole there, that's a remainder punch. Loads of these were remaindered, so a lot of them didn't sell, which is quite interesting. Now, the Gibson obviously won the Hugo Award, the Nebula Award, and the Philip K. Dick Memorial Award, which is for a paperback original, because it was a paperback original, as all of these are. But it just goes to show a lot of these didn't really sort of take off, which is quite interesting, really. And Swanwick, probably Vacuum Flowers is the best early one, I would say. And in the 90s, Stations of the Tide, which I really like as well. So I thought I'd pick that as well, even though I've got the UK first of that. And that's a nice slender book, and it's just really interesting. If you look at the size of these books, we're starting to see slightly bigger books in the 80s, but we're still getting nice, fleet, swift, slim things as well, which is really good. Then when again, this took some tracking down, and it's an uncommon book in the UK in this edition. There was a UK edition. I can't think who published the UK one, but I think it came after his second novel. It's Jack McDevitt's The Hercules Text, and this isn't bad because I'm actually reading it at the moment, so I've not read this one. A Talent for War was his second book, and that caused a bigger splash. And really, I'm reading this at the moment, and it's a first contact novel. It's kind of like Contact by Carl Sagan, but it's written really well, and it's central characters, you know, there's a message from the stars, and there's this project, it's near future. This was set sort of, I think, when is it set? Set sort of end of the 20th century, and dates like 89 and 90 are mentioned as being in the past. And it's a really, really good story. I'm really enjoying it. I'm only a little way in, and it begins with some really good characterization, and Gregory Benford liked it. He's got a quote on here. But the fact is that, you know, there's some good characterization, realistic situations, and the focus character, at least initially, is an administrator who works for this team of astronomers, and this message comes from what appears to be a pulsar, and it can only be a message of intelligent life. And what the researchers have found in the sort of times running up to this, as they've had this text, is that they thought it would be really easy to find life, and it's actually proved to be really difficult. So there's somebody I believe, it's not somebody I watch very much. I was told by a friend of mine that somebody who's kind of quite big in the SF YouTube community said that Jack McDevitt was a hack, and I would say, based on this, he's not a hack at all. You know, it has to be said. There's some really good, solid novelistic skills that you'd expect in a mainstream novel in here. The way he depicts the character at the beginning, who's about to break up with his wife, domestic issues, it's done with real charm, you know, and it's done with the sort of detail and sensitivity that you'd really expect. So yeah, so I'm really impressed with that so far. I'm enjoying it, because I have been reading some other things I've got bogged down with, because I am a bit sick of SF at the moment, to be honest, and because I've been a bit sick generally, I'm sort of looking forward to sort of getting away on holiday, and everything's been a bit much really. So yes, I'm enjoying that. It's quite refreshing. Then we come on to some books which are not so well known, generally speaking. The later ones are not well known. Of course, this series obviously is dominated by these two being really big, Green Eyes being really important. Swanwick won loads and loads of awards, and McDevitt, you know, had a bit of a splash late 80s. Then the things which come later are not so well known. When you get to 1987, Terry Card died, and I think the last couple were things he edited, and he commissioned some of these. I mean, he commissioned Neuromancer when he talked to Gibson at the Worldcon in 1981, and of course it took Gibson several years to finish Neuromancer, and he was working on the Sprawl stories by that point. This is The Net by Lauren J. McGregor. Not something I know much about. It does look very sort of basic to me, a hard-boiled freewheeling adventurer who's turned to crime for fun and profit. It looks very routine, but you know, who can say? So we'll have to have a look at that. John Varley likes it. That rather puts me off. I really don't get on with John Varley's prose. He has good ideas. I personally don't think he can write for toffee, but there you go. So, and The Net, again, it does make you think of the internet and the common livery of these with these grids. I think the earlier ones, which are all black, are certainly the nicer ones, and the Robinson and Gibson are in that as well, but we shall see, I guess. Then a book which I read back at that time, and you'll see again a remainder punch. This is Metrophage by Richard Kkiffy, and this is sort of like, to me, one of the last true cyberpunk books. And I think the SF Encyclopedia says there's a memorable line which always sticks in my head about how it feels like a bored social researcher with his finger jammed on the fast forward button. And I would say that's pretty true. And Kkiffy, he writes really good surfaces. You know, he's really good on the surface. I sometimes think there isn't that much underneath. And in recent years, he's done really well over the last 10 years or so with the Sandman Slim series, which are kind of occult thrillers with a character who for some reason just reminds me of Iggy Pop. And they've been competing with Jim Butcher's Dresden Files. And, you know, I would say they're probably better, because if it comes to sort of fast moving, good lyrical, crunchy, textured surfaces, Kkiffy is much better, I would say. And this is set in LA in the future, sort of underground type thing, streetwise, Jeter Gibson sort of thing. And, you know, Jeter is the guy I would cleave to there because he was harder and tougher. But he managed to stay out of all this stuff because, you know, he's an outsider amongst outsiders. SF writers and SF readers are outsiders. But the really important people are the outsiders amongst the outsiders, as it were. So, and, you know, Spinrad liked it, and he does have a lot of energy and verve and heart. But I often wonder if there's anything much underneath it. But I've not read it for years, so I'll go back to it. But Metrophage, I do like that. The idea of a city eater. And that refers back to John Shirley, you know, City Come A-Walking. So Shirley, I think, is probably the most neglected of the original cyberpunk writers, and the one who deserves, you know, the most credit in lots of ways. Then Tides of God by Ted Reynolds. This is from, let's see, this is 88, I think. Kkiffy's 88, and that was the last one, I think, that Carr did, because Carr died suddenly and he was only about 50, 52. And then Ted Reynolds, and this, again, to me, looks like fairly standard sort of stuff, and it's about God invading the planet Earth, which, you know, sounds very Dickian. Michael P. Q. McDowell likes it, who is sort of towards the hard end of things. I have read short stories by Ted Reynolds. I can't remember much about them at all. So Damon Knight, a very reliable hand, took on the editorship then. So that's again one I've got to look at. That was part of the thing, really. What sort of got me thinking I'd get these was that there were some books I didn't know, and I remember some of them from the time. Some of them were never published in the UK. I don't think the Ted Reynolds was ever published in the UK. I don't think the McGregor was. I was visiting import shops then. There was so much publishing going on. It was a really exciting time, as I say. You couldn't buy everything. I was reading a heck of a lot, but not getting through sort of everything at the time. So they are interesting ones. This is a really obscure one. This is quite hard to get, and I couldn't get it in really good nick. And again, you notice the dread remainder punch. This is Black Snow Days by Claudia O'Keeffe, who, again, an obscure figure. It's got some sticker residue there. It's not in fantastic nick, but this took some finding. Again, the remainder punch, which shows they weren't always commercially successful. So this is somebody coming out of a coma and finding themselves in a future war. Again, an old idea, but I love the title and I love that cover illustration. So we shall see. So these are all things I'm going to read and report back on as we go through the years on Outlaw Bookseller. And finally, again, coming in at the very end of the series, and this one was 1990, so the series started in 84, and a couple of books a year. There were 5 in 84, and the fifth one was Neuromancer, and then 85, 86, 87, 80, 89, and sort of one a year after that. It really slowed down, and there was just so much publishing going on. Of course, other publishers are picking these people up as well. And finally, the series ended with The Oxygen Barons by Gregory Feely. I love that title. Again, I've had this for a while. It's in really good nick. I can't think what I got this from. I bought this from a dealer online, and this is sort of set on the moon, a lunar republic. And funnily enough, I've been reading Tim Marshall's book recently about the future of war and conflict in space, which is interesting. So this feels quite sort of timely for me to have another look at. So that's pretty much how they panned out. So that's the complete set of 70s Ace specials. I did this on the previous video, went handheld, and of course we were missing Orbitsville here. So they're all on there. Very pretty, I think you'll agree. And it was really the liveries that did it for me, and the chance to read some things I hadn't read before, like Red Tide by D.D. Chapman and Dolores Lehman Tarzan. And there's still some of these I'm yet to read, like From the Legend of Beale, The Swans I haven't read, and there's a few favourites there like Lem and Yarbrough, who I've always liked. The Gotch chalk I read a while ago. Somebody on the channel mentioned to me an anecdote that Thomas M. Dish said about Walton Lee Richmond, which is in Dish's book The Dreams Our Stuff Is Made Of, which is about SF, and I haven't read it for decades. I've got it, and he said there's a great anecdote in there about how Dish stayed with them and realised they were completely balmy, so completely bonkers. So we'll have to have a look at that, because I can't remember that at all. So there you go. So that's the complete set for those of you who like to see a bit of completism. And here's the 1980s third series in order, left to right as you read, obviously minus Neuromancer and The Wild Shore. And you know, if I pick those up, I'll redo this. I'll maybe do a bigger thing and tell you more about the book since I've read a few more of them. But I really like this sort of Matrix livery on those particularly, and that was in the on the Gibson and Kim Stanley Robinson as well, of course. So yeah, very handsome, I think you'll agree. And let's say text, Hercules text is unbagged because I'm actually doing that one at the moment and enjoying it, as I say. And then they go to this other livery, which is similar ballpark colours underneath. And yeah, what a shame Terry Carr didn't get to finish them, but I think you'll agree they're very attractive books. And maybe I will go for the others, but it's a question of money and time really, so maybe we'll see. Next, we're going to do a little collector diary supplement, looking at some things I've picked up recently, just because I'm in the mood really, and I want to get some of this stuff out of the way because it's sitting out and there's absolutely no room here in the hideout. It's an absolute nightmare. We're getting critical mass again, so I'm going to have to do some more eBaying and selling, and I might even have to go off to Hay and shift some stuff because just can't move at the moment. So, collector diary supplemental, just a sort of few things to close off really, and these are of course the Mike Barry thrillers, Lone Wolf series. Barry N. Malsberg, using the pseudonym Mike Barry, he did 14 of these. There have been 7 omnibus editions printed by Stark House, and I've just sort of managed to complete them recently. I got some from work, and I think volume 4 was bought for me by one of the subscribers to the channel. Thanks for that, that was great. So pop them up there. It would be nice to get the A formats. They're really pricey, they're uncommon in the UK, and I just really want them for my shelves. And I have read the first one of these, and they are more formulaic than Barry's normal things. So there you go. So that's Killing Run, Philadelphia Blow Up, Peruvian Nightmare, and Los Angeles Holocaust. Subtle titles, I think you'll agree. And then we get Detroit Massacre and Phoenix Inferno. So I've got these completely out of order, haven't I? What an absolute burk. So we should be going like this. There we go, but these are the ones which are missing, and as I say, I already had one in the middle of this run, so those are now here, and they're as lurid as the day is long, aren't they, even though they're not the A format originals. So I just felt really I should share those with you, and I've got to find room on the shelves. I don't know where I'm going to put them actually, because my sort of trade paperback Barry Malsberg zone is absolutely rammed, and I take some other stuff out. I don't know, am I going to take some Delaney's out? Who can say? But more importantly, recently I was purchased a copy of the Library of America Vonnegut sort of second level novel, second sort of phase as it were, which is really nice. And that means I can sell on my Gollancz hardcover of Cat's Cradle. It's not a first because I'm not, it's a reprint, a laminate boards, and I'm not keen on it. And I've got a 50th anniversary edition of Slaughterhouse 5, and both of those are in the Library of America edition that I was bought with, gifted from the old wish list. But I got round to getting this, which is Slaughterhouse 5, and I've got a sort of Panther, Grafton, Granada it would be of this from back in the day, and this is Jonathan Cape, and this went through various reprints over the years. This is an 86 reprint. I remember selling this because it stayed in print for years, never got to getting it. I just love this really simple livery. It's just so cool, and I got that online. It's relatively uncommon, and it wasn't really cheap, it wasn't really expensive. I had some sort of credit from my Nectar card, so I used some of that on it, and I popped that up. And yeah, so I'm really pleased with that because this is sort of a classic livery to me, very, very much so. And there's curtain in the back, and it's some really nice paper, and I love that typeface. And Slaughterhouse, even though I'm not one of those people who normally likes the most canonical book, I think with Vonnegut it probably is his best. I think he sort of got the balance just right there, so I was pleased to get that. What else have we got recently? Well, off to Paris soon. By the time you see this, I'm probably going to actually be in Paris. I would have just come back, and this is a book I haven't read for years, and I got rid of my Dover thrift edition, and I came across this, the Dennis Wheatley Library of the Occult. This is volume 23. There are about 40 of these, Really good little series actually, and I always wanted this one. It does have a bit of a faded spine, but I can live with that. And I don't know why I got rid of my Dover one, because I had it for years, but it went out in one of those culls. And this is J.K. Huysman's down there, the first of the Dirt Isle trilogy, and this is about black magic, and it begins with this conversation between two different adherents of the school of literature, which was big in France at the end of the 19th century. And Huysman started as like a realist, but he went over more to the decadent movement, and then he eventually sort of converted to Catholicism, and that's what the trilogy is about. But in this, his character Dirt Isle, who sort of stands in for Huysman's himself, you know, he's starting to get involved in black magic, and he's obsessed with Gilles de Rais, the multiple child murderer and things. And it's great, you know. I like Huysman's a lot. I've read loads of his work, and he's very important. If you want to read Houellebecq is what I call him. Houellebecq, I suppose, is the proper pronunciation. Submission, the current French writer. Submission is an SF novel about Islam becoming dominant in a near future France. To really understand that, because that's full of references to Huysman's and this trilogy, you have to have sort of read Huysman's. And I picked this up and reread some of it the other day. I might actually take it to Paris, because it'd be good to read a French book there, and I don't fancy taking an SF novel. I could do with a change. So yeah, but really lovely little A format livery, and you know, a good series to collect if you want to do the completism thing, but they are numbered. I don't do this numbered completism thing, as I say a lot of people do. So, but I did have a look, and there's lots of books in it I've already read or got in different editions, so you know, it's one of those things. Fantastic literature, Simon Gosden, who's looking up for some stuff for me at the moment. He had a couple of copies of this. This is a Bishop which I sort of never had, and this is a Berkeley Medallion edition of A Little Knowledge, early 80s. It's got a little bit of a mark there, but I can live with that. This is an uncommon book, and it's about born again Christians and that sort of thing, and you see there's crosses everywhere. And I love Bishop, one of the great humanists, and fantastic stuff. So, and as I say, I don't know how I missed this one. His earlier stuff from the 70s is very florid and colourful and ornate and decadent. Then he gets in this really smooth humanist thing, which is very wise. So this is sort of between those two phases. So I'm really interested to read that, because I've not read that one, and it's not too thick. You know, he's really sort of great writer. He deserves your attention if you've never read Bishop. So that was a gap filler. And finally, another gap filler. This is a thriller, a mainstream novel, and let's see, what year is this from? This is from 1994, and it's somebody who, again, I was neglecting from the early 90s onward. That's Spin Rat, Pictures at 11, and that guy looks like Donald Trump. Good grief, that's worrying. And a lovely A format. It's a little bit sort of concave there, so we're going to have to give that a squash. And it's about a you know, a sort of a hostage gunpoint situation, and all sorts of things happening in there. Nice and chunky. So this will be Norman at his rip-roaring best, confronting all the issues fearlessly as ever. So yeah, so that's really nice. So my Norman sort of thing is coming together. Have I bought anything else recently? I don't think so. I'm trying to step back a bit at the moment, because if you do too much collecting, the fact is it can actually get you down. And I do think you can have too much, and you can get too obsessive about it. And that's one of the things with YouTube. You end up doing loads of these book hauls, and you get really into it, but it's not always the best way to buy books. And I just watched a video which Matt Defoe at Science Fiction Reads, hey Matt, just published, and Matt's a great solid guy, and he mentioned me in it because he managed to get a CL Moore best of, and he got this lovely cracking lot of Door world's sort of best SF, but in the hard covers, and that sort of thing's impossible to get over here. You might see one or two, but to get a pile for about $10 is something. So there's a little supplement for you. Hope you enjoyed that. Back again soon. Bye for now.